On today's Home Theater Geeks, we're going to talk about Sony's 2023 TV lineup. So stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Hey there, Scott Wilkinson here, the Home Theater Geek. Today we're going to talk about Sony's 2023 TV lineup. Now, normally at CES, all the major TV manufacturers show all their new products for the year in their booth. But Sony took a pass. They didn't show any TVs in their booth at CES this year. Instead, they showed them separately this month, in fact, in March, to journalists on Zoom calls. And they talked about all the features and all the models and so on. I knew there was going to be new TVs from Sony, as there are from Samsung and LG and all the other TV makers. And I was particularly interested in what they were going to do with the QD-OLED, quantum dot OLED, which is the first new flat panel technology to come around in maybe 10 years. And they introduced it last year, as did Samsung. They were the only two to have them. And so this year represents the second generation. And I was particularly interested to see, would they introduce a 77-inch version? Last year, they were 55 and 65 inches, which are fine. But I'm looking for a bigger TV, and I know a lot of you are too. So I was happy to learn that, yes, indeed, there is a 77-inch version. It's called the A95L. This brings up an interesting point about model numbers. A95L, the L represents 2023. Last year's models all ended in K, which represents 2022. And an interesting point about model numbers here, Samsung's QD-OLED is called the S95B from 2022 and the S95C for this year, 2023. And I find it kind of interesting that both Samsung and Sony decided to use 95 in their model number for this TV, followed by a letter indicating the year. It's a little confusing, but you get used to it after a while. They also introduced one conventional OLED, which is like the OLEDs we've had for many years now, the A80L, which comes in 55, 65, and 77 and 83-inch models. And that's a conventional OLED with a panel made by LG, as all conventional OLEDs are. The QD-OLED panels are made by Samsung Display, and both Samsung and Sony use those panels in their TVs. There were two new mini LED TVs, which are LCD TVs with smaller LED backlights. And many more local dimming zones. They have the X95L, which is available only in 85-inch, and the X93L, which is available in several sizes, 65, 75, and 85 inches. They have very similar performance, these two TVs. The only difference is that the X95L has a feature called XR Clear Image, and something called a frame tweeter, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, and 13% more local dimming zones than the 93. So if you want an 85-inch TV, and you can spend the extra little bit probably that it will be, the X95L is going to be the one to get. There was one new FALD, FALD, full array local dimming LED TV without mini LEDs behind it, but just regular LEDs. And that's the X90L, and that's available in 55, 65, 75, 85, and 98 inches. That's a behemoth. Man, oh man. There's also one other model that they introduced that was new called the X77L, which is what they call direct LED. It's not FALD. It doesn't have local dimming zones, and therefore I don't recommend it. It's less expensive, of course, but it's just, I really, really think if you're going to get an LCD TV, you want to get one with this full array local dimming or FALD. That's really important for contrast and overall picture quality. It really makes a big difference. And so I really do strongly recommend it. So what about the new features in the 2023 models? Well, in terms of video processing, they have a video processor. And this is what distinguishes Sony from Samsung, from LG. They may all get their panels from the same place, but they do their own processing. And that's really what distinguishes one from the other. And Sony's processing is really good. They have something called the Cognitive Processor XR. And this year they've added a feature to that processing called XR Clear Image, which is enhanced noise reduction, enhanced upscaling, adaptive processing. It uses AI, artificial intelligence, to do this. And it's available in the A95L, the QD-OLED, the A80L, the regular conventional OLED, and the X95L and the X90L. It's not available in the X93 or the models below that. The most important part of that, I think, for me, is that it increases the brightness of the QD-OLED by 200%. And it also adds something called thermal analysis, which keeps track of which pixels are brighter than others over time and does something, I'm not quite sure what, to manage the wearing in of the pixels, which combats image retention. OLEDs do have a slight problem with image retention. If you leave the same image on them for days at a time, that image can be retained. Sort of like the old plasma TVs, but less severe than that. In any event, you might think, well, geez, brightness, how bright can they get? And one of these shows I'm going to talk about, can TVs be too bright? And the answer is probably not, because in HDR, high dynamic range, you've got bright highlights and you've got dark parts, presumably, maybe even in the same image. You're not going to have a full screen at huge high brightness. It's just not going to happen. So increasing the brightness is important to widen the range between the brightest bits, little tiny bits usually, and the darkest parts. And that widening of that dynamic range really makes the image much more impressive. It really pops. So that increase of 200% brightness in the QD-OLED, I think, is really important. It brings the QD-OLED closer to LCD TVs, or what are now called LED TVs, for the backlight, which can get much brighter than OLED. Now, that's not a problem for me. I watch in a darkened environment, and any real home theater geek watches in a darkened environment. But if you have your TV in the living room, say, and you watch during the day and there's lots of windows around, you need more brightness to compete with that, which is why in that particular case, an LCD TV or an LED TV might be a better choice. This improvement that I'm talking about right here means that might no longer be the important factor. You can buy a QD-OLED and have it be plenty bright in a bright room. So I think that's pretty important. They've also increased the number of local dimming zones in the X95L, which is the mini LED, and the X90L, which is the LED TV, not mini LED. And they also increased its brightness by 30% with this processor. So that's good. They have a number of audio features as well that I wanted to touch upon. One is called Acoustic Center Sync. What that does is it allows the TV's own sound system to become the center channel in conjunction with certain Sony sound bars. So I always say, don't rely exclusively on the sound system of the TV, because it's generally sounds pretty awful. Instead, if the next step up is buying a soundbar, and that's going to sound a whole lot better. And if you do, and you buy a Sony soundbar, then it may very well be that the Sony TV can act as the center channel. And that's going to be available in the A95L, the A80L, the X95L, X93L, and X90L. So most of the new models. They also have something called 360 spatial sound mapping, which is sound field optimization. And again, in conjunction with Sony soundbars, can actually create the illusion of an immersive sound field. In a couple of these models, the X95L and the holdover Z9K, some of their models from last year are going to continue to be sold this year. That's one of them. Acoustic Multi-Audio Plus. I love how they come up with these names for things. But actually, the frame of the TV, as small as it is, the bezel, if you will, actually has a tweeter in it, and it produces high frequencies. More important, though, is the acoustic surface audio, which the two OLEDs, the QD-OLED and the conventional OLED, can do. And what that is, it's a technology I think was developed by LG originally. I might be wrong about that, so don't quote me. But it takes the entire screen of the TV and turns it into a speaker. And they've been doing that. Sony's been doing that since their very first OLED, the A1E. And I have to tell you, the sound quality of that is far better than the sound quality of tiny little speakers embedded around the TV somewhere in the bottom or in the back, facing backwards. Those sound terrible, but this acoustic surface really does make a big improvement in the sound quality coming from the TV. And when you combine that with this acoustic center channel sync, and a Sony soundbar, one of several, the quality of the center channel is really going to be pretty good. So that's what I recommend you do if you want to step up from the TV sound by itself. So Sony offers a bunch of content, streaming content, on a platform called Bravia Core, and it now supports Dolby Atmos, which is immersive surround sound with sound coming from overhead and around you. It's a 180-degree hemispherical sound field. Really very nice. And with content that has it embedded and coded in it, it's really a wonderful experience. It also supports a format called IMAX Enhanced, which is promoted by IMAX, obviously, and it specifies certain things about the sound and the picture to improve that experience. And Bravia Core now supports that. They have bit rates up to 80 megabits per second, which is really fast. And what that means is the picture quality and the sound quality are going to be better than from many streaming services. Now, they also have something called Game Menu. Those of you who are gamers will appreciate this. It used to be that you had to kind of dig down into the menu system to get to the game controls, the controls that optimize the display for games. Now you can just hit one button and a separate menu comes up with all the game parameters. And that's pretty good for gamers. I myself am not a gamer, so it doesn't matter to me, but a lot of people are. And if you are, this game menu thing is an important thing. They also have an eco dashboard that lets you dial down the power usage. There are various settings that you can do to minimize the power usage in a single dashboard. Now, as usual, they did not specify pricing and they did not specify availability other than late spring. So, we're going to, this is normal. They announce at CES, or in this case, March, and probably by May or June, we will see the TVs actually become available. And shortly before that, they will announce prices. And I'll bring those to you as soon as I can. I will tell you this, Sony prices are typically higher than equivalent Samsung products. So the Samsung QD-OLED is already out. In fact, Leo Laporte just got one and invited me up to his place to check it out, which I certainly intend to do. And the Sony will undoubtedly be somewhat more expensive. But the Sony will support Dolby Vision HDR, which Samsung does not. And that to me is a deal breaker. Not to everybody, But to me, I really want the ability to display Dolby Vision content as it was created and intended to be seen. Sony supports it. Samsung does not. So I'm willing to pay a premium for that. As I said at the top, I'm really excited about the QD-OLED, the A95L, especially the 77-inch version. So I'm looking forward to asking Sony for a review unit, and I'll certainly tell you all about it once I get one and have a chance to sit with it for a while. Hey there, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Home Theater Geeks. If you'd like more, you need to be a member of Club TWiT, which costs only $7 a month, and that gives you full access to everything the club has to offer, including all podcasts ad-free and access to the club Discord. Or you can subscribe to Home Theater Geeks by itself for $2.99 a month. You can also get the ad-free audio version for $2.99 a month on Apple Podcasts. New episodes drop every Thursday via Club TWiT and Apple Podcasts. With full club membership, you can even watch us record the show live. Just keep an eye on the events tab in the club Discord for the schedule. I hope you'll join me for a weekly dose of home theater geekitude. Until then, geek out.